Hi, I'm Diana and this is my channel Dinky Loves Books that's all about books and reading. I set my target every month to read about 12 to 14 books, and then I try to do a wrap up fortnightly because wrapping them all up at the end of the month would be far too much. There would be far too many books and the video would go on for far too long. Today I'm going to do a wrap up of the books that I have read till the 15th of September, and those are a total of 9, so let's get started. The first one is The Valedictorian of Being Dead by Heather B. Armstrong. Some of you may not be familiar with Heather B. Armstrong. She has a blog called Deuce.com and she's one of the original mommy bloggers. I think the term mommy blogger may have been coined just because of her. I'm not certain, but perhaps. So if you've read her blog, you would know that she's always struggled with depression, and in this particular book she talks about a particular period of depression that she was going through for 18 months, and then she was invited to take part in a trial where there would be some experimental and breakthrough treatment being administered to patients of depression, and over a 1-month period she would be required to attend 10 sessions, and during that session she would be put under for 15 minutes at a time, which means that all brain activity would cease for those 15 minutes and technically she'd be dead. This would check whether there was any significant and long-lasting impact on the state of her mind and whether her depression would be cured or at least would be diminished in some way. And she does state that by the end of the book she found a significant improvement and she's never experienced another episode of depression since then, so I guess it worked for her. The reason I read this book was because I'm very interested in mental health issues and I'm always curious to know about new and breakthrough treatments that can be used in the alleviation and the cure of mental health issues, and particularly in anxiety and in depression. People who are interested in health, in mental health, will find this book very interesting, and also those who have been following Deuce.com or are aware of Heather B. Armstrong and are interested in her struggle with depression will definitely find this book interesting. I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars and I would definitely recommend it. The second book was Educated by Tara Westover. Now this is a memoir by the author talking about her time in the mountains of Idaho when she was part of her survivalist family. Now they are very extreme in their beliefs and they don't even visit a hospital if they are sick, and the children, she was I think the youngest of 7 children, and she never set foot in school or college till she was 17 years of age. She didn't know anything about the Holocaust, she didn't know about the civil rights movement, she knew nothing of the events of history that have been so pivotal and important. She faces a lot of abuse, physical, emotional and mental, but she doesn't realize that what she's facing is abuse. And later on, when she's more educated and more aware, she realizes that her father could possibly be a victim of mental illness, but then there's not much she can do about it at that point of time. She then goes on to Harvard and Cambridge, and if I'm not mistaken, she earns herself a doctorate. So all's well that ends well, except that it doesn't. Her family doesn't take this very well, so they kind of boycott her and alienate her from the family because she went against their wishes and she didn't live up to their expectation of what a good daughter should be. It was a very difficult book to read, not because of the language, which was simple enough, but reading about all the repression and abuse was very difficult. It was also very difficult for me to understand how somebody who was going through all this abuse wasn't able to identify it as abuse and report it to somebody. There were also some other inconsistencies in the book that I was not able to reconcile with, but then I overlooked them in the interest of understanding the role of education in the narrative and how it helps towards improving one's circumstances and securing one's freedom. I gave it 3 stars out of 5 and I would definitely recommend that you read it. The next book I read was Circe by Madeline Miller, and I'm so glad that I finally got around to reading it because it was so difficult to avoid reading its synopsis and listening to reviews by other people who had already read it. It was getting very difficult for me to escape from it, so I decided to finally go ahead and read it, and I'm very glad that I did because it's an excellent book. Issue issue with mythology is that it can get really heavy and it can get really difficult to read. It can be difficult to keep track of the characters and who is who and what their powers are and what their role is. I think the author does a stellar job of presenting the figures of Greek mythology to us in a way where we don't get overwhelmed and intimidated by them, and she simplifies it a great deal so that we can follow the story without much confusion. So the story is about Circe, who is the daughter of the god of the sun Helios, and her mother is just a nymph, which is why she doesn't hold much honor and respect in society, because her father is the mightiest of the titans and Circe is just a nobody. And then she's accused of practicing witchcraft and she's banished to the island of Aiaia, where she has to learn how to not only survive but thrive, which she does, and she creates this wonderful life for herself and later on for her son on the island. The character of Circe starts off as a naive girl, but then she grows into this formidable woman who is part sorceress and part witch. I loved the author's style of writing, which is very simple and readable, and also I love the fact that she doesn't treat gods in this book as all powerful and almighty. She gives them very human traits and characteristics, and they feel all these emotions like love and vengeance and jealousy and hatred and anger, and I think that's what makes them more relatable, and we are very invested and interested in reading about them further. My favorite part of the book was when she turned Scylla into a monster, and another favorite is when she turned the men into pigs. This book is beautiful in every way and warrants a read and a reread, so yes, definitely a 5-star read for me. The next book is by the immensely talented Elif Shafak, and it is 10 minutes and 38 seconds in this strange world. This book is a feast for the imagination. Even if you've never set foot in Turkey, the evocative writing and all the sensory input that this book provides you, it makes you feel like you've already been to Turkey and experienced all of it yourself. The story is about Tequila Leela, who is a prostitute, and at the beginning of this book she has been murdered and her body has been dumped into a dumpster, a garbage bin, and that is where she is finally dying and recalling her life right from her birth to the time when she was murdered and dumped in the bin. And this entire flashback takes 10 minutes and 38 seconds, which is, according to a scientific study, it states that even after you are dead, your body and your senses can survive for up to 10 minutes and 38 seconds. After that is when you actually die. So that is the entire period that she is recalling everything that has ever happened up to this moment, and we get a minute by minute account. Like the first minute is about her childhood and the second minute is about some other period of her life, and that's how the entire book goes. Like I said, this is a marvelous piece of fiction, and the only reason I gave it 4 out of 5 stars is that there's a section of the book where there are some friends who are trying to deal with a body. I think that part of the book took on a slightly farcical and comedic turn, and I thought that was very jarring with the rest of the tone of the book, and it almost felt a little disrespectful, but that's just my opinion. There are a lot of other people who even loved that part of the book. I personally didn't. In the end, they did manage to figure out what to do with the body and they gave it a farewell. It ended well, but the section in between is something that I couldn't reconcile myself to. That's why I gave it 4 stars. You should definitely read it. It's brilliant in its structure and its narration. So yes, an eminently readable book. You should definitely read it. The next book was Acute, YA novel that is widely popular, and it was Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. Now, I'm very interested in titles of books, and this title definitely interested me. The book itself was just like a cute, easy read, and it's about this boy Simon who is actually gay, but he doesn't reveal this to anybody. He hasn't come out, and he strikes up this romance with another boy, and they correspond by email. One of his classmates finds out and tries to blackmail him, and he goes along with it for a while, but then he realizes it's not worth it. So he comes out and declares himself to the world, and he also finds out who his crush is. This book was made into the film Love, Simon, and I watched that after reading this book, and quite frankly I prefer the film to the book, because the film is more up-to-date and relevant with its cultural references and all of that, and also because it has the right balance of seriousness and light-hearted moments. So yes, definitely the movie over the book, but the book was fun to read, so I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book was a fast-paced thriller by John Mars, and it was called The One. Now this is a very modern but a fairly simple concept to think about, but not so realistically. It involves a company called Match Your DNA, and what they do is basically you just need to give them a mouth swab, a sample of your saliva, and they do a DNA test and they match you with your DNA match. So how this is helpful is that you don't have to spend all your time and energy and effort in trying to find the perfect match for you, because it's almost guaranteed that if you are able to find and to create a life with your DNA match, you will live happily ever after. Or so it is theoretically. The book is 415 pages long, so you know that there's going to be a lot that happens in those pages. And what happens is we are following 5 characters who have supposedly found their DNA match, but then they find out this huge secret that threatens to destroy everything they believe in and change their lives forever. It was a really exciting read. You should definitely read it, even despite its length. It just made me think that human beings will brainwash themselves into believing whatever it is that they are so desperate to believe, as long as they get the outcome they desire. The next book I read was The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. Shonda Rhimes is the creator of such hit TV shows like How to Get Away with Murder and Grey's Anatomy, which was and continues to be widely popular. I just wanted to have an insight into her life and her thought process, her creative process that, made her come up with shows like that. And I thought she would have a lesson or two to give us. But I was sorely disappointed in this book because there was really nothing much that I could take away from it. Perhaps I was expecting something like the Jim Carrey film Yes Man, where he says yes to everything for a year and then strange and wonderful things happen to him. But I was expecting less rom-com and more realism, but that didn't happen. This was quite a boring book and I found myself struggling to get through it, but I'm one of those people who are quite determined to get to the end of the book unless it's really, really bad, which this wasn't. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars, and you can definitely give it a miss. The next book I read was This Is Going to Hurt: Secret Diaries of a Junior Doctor by Adam Kay. And as the name suggests, it's a series of anecdotes and funny stories about a junior doctor in the National Health Service in the UK. I was in the mood for a funny book, and this definitely gave me a few laughs. I laughed out loud a couple of times because of the strange and funny stories that he narrated in this book. It's quite a short read as well, so if you're in the mood for some medical humor, I don't know if there's such a genre, but this is what I classified it as, you can definitely give this book a shot. It was a 3.5 star read for me. The last but not the least book is also by John Mars, and it's called The Passengers. Now, I didn't know John Mars wrote such brilliant books. These were the first 2 books that I ever read from him, and I definitely want to read more. The Passengers is a nail-biting thriller, and this is also 400 pages long, but you will want to finish it in a day, I promise. It tells the story of 8 passengers who get into state-of-the-art self-driven cars, and they are on their way to their destination, but suddenly these cars are taken over by a hacker, and they are told that they will be not reaching their destination, as in there is a jury of people who are going to decide over the period of the next 2.5 hours whether they get to live or die. And the scary part is that only one person will get to live, all the rest will die, and their fate will be decided by that jury. Like I said, this was a nail-biting thriller. I enjoyed every moment of it, and if you're a fan of thrillers, you are definitely going to love this book. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. So that was my wrap up of books that I read in the first fortnight of September. If you liked this video, please don't forget to give it a like, and also to come back to my channel for more videos like this. I'll be back soon with another video, and I hope to see you then. Bye.